Hey y'all, we just finished talking about the Reformation, and now we're going to talk about the Renaissance and Scientific Revolution. So, the main idea here is not only did the religious landscape change in Western Europe, we see major changes in the way people of the time thought about the world and about themselves. So, leading into the beginning of the Renaissance, there was the Black Death, which, as we know, wiped out a large amount of the population, starvation, and constant warfare that decreased the population. And so, as a result of this decrease, the amount of food farmers were making stayed the same, and there was less people, so there was more food for everybody. And as a result of the higher supply of food, we see a decrease in the price. This freed up people's time and money for the arts. And so, as we see here, this is the political map of Western into Eastern Europe. We see that the Byzantine Empire is gone at this time, the Ottoman Empire has taken it over, and we see the development of different states. So, some ideas of the Renaissance. First, Renaissance means French for rebirth. It started in Italy and was a period of renewed interest and remarkable developments in art, science, and learning. So, we see five main causes of the Renaissance. The first being increased trade with Asia and other regions of the world. So, the Crusades were not totally unsuccessful for Christians in Europe. What we see is essentially increased interaction and cultural diffusion as a result of the failed warfare that was the Crusades. The second cause was growth of wealthy city-states in Italy, so people had more money again, so they could afford to pay for these things or do these things themselves. Third, we see a renewed interest in classical learning of ancient Greece and Rome. As a result of this increased trade with Asia and Middle East and Islamic civilizations, they all preserved the things from Greece and ancient Rome, and so essentially they're able to re-access this knowledge and implement them themselves. We see number four, a rise of rich and powerful merchants who become supporters of the arts. That's very closely tied to number two. Number five, increased desire for science and technical knowledge. So again, more time to think. And six, desire to beautify cities. So two of the main Renaissance ideas that we're going to talk about is humanism and secularism. Humanism is an emphasis on human achievement and stress to focus on human nature. This was seen all throughout the art and literature during the time period, this idea of human achievement and individualism. And essentially, they harnessed humanism at the time to beautify and make their living situations better. We also see a focus on secularism, which is essentially where people focused on what was happening here on Earth rather than concerning themselves with what was happening in the skies above. So they didn't really talk or develop as much literature at this time about spiritual or religious beliefs. So one of the most important aspects of this was the scientific revolution, so the way that we see ourselves and the way it's tied into science and math. So prior to the Renaissance, we see a geocentric model where medieval theorists believed that it was the Earth that was the center of the universe. So essentially this idea of me, I'm here in the middle, everything else revolves around us, right? The sun, the moon, and the planets. The Earth is the center. That must be true because we are the chosen ones as dictated by religion. And so as we see through the development of the scientific method at this time, which is, again, we should hopefully know this, but if not, where you form a hypothesis, you develop experiments to test that hypothesis and analyze results to form a conclusion, we see these Renaissance thinkers and scientific revolutionaries changing what was previously believed through the geocentric model. So one of those people was Copernicus, I can never say his name. He directly challenged this model by developing the heliocentric model that theorizes the sun, not the earth, is at the center of the universe. And as we all know, he was right. He was also the first to create a model of the solar system. We have Galileo, who built the first telescope to observe Saturn, moon craters, and he also discovered the Milky Way. We also see Sir Isaac Newton during this time combining astronomy, physics, and mathematics to discover gravity, which led him to develop our favorite subject of all time, calculus. We also see discoveries in biology and chemistry, so two important things here, obviously. Some discoveries about the human body. We see Andreas Vesalius dissecting bodies of criminals to identify what was actually happening in our human body. This practice directly disputed previous belief that the zodiac or religion controlled the body. So as you see here, this is something that he wrote. If you can zoom in, I don't know if you can see there's little numbers. Essentially, this is him numbering the muscles to show the human body and the way it actually works and not just theoretical concepts about the zodiac or about religion. We also see some discoveries in chemistry at this time. Hooke used a microscope to discover a cell, and Boyle, who is often referred to as the father of chemistry, discovered atoms and molecules. So Renaissance art was huge at this time. There's three important things to note that we're going to talk about: the Renaissance art style, the way they paid for it, who paid for it, and who they paid, and the architecture. So first, the style. The goal of Renaissance art was to paint the natural world as realistically as possible, either depicting nature or humans. And one of the most important distinguishing factors that we see this concept of three dimension coming up. Previous to this time period in the medieval period and Middle Ages, we see 2D art. So essentially it looks flat. But now during this time we see 3D where they look like people that you could bring to life. We see artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo during this time period, and this is one of the most famous paintings that came out of the Renaissance, The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Payment. So essentially what happened was, since nobles had a lot more money during this time and Italy had wealthier city-states, what we see is nobles paying artists to create artwork for them. And the Medici family is one of the most prominent benefactors of the arts, and so that family is responsible for funding a lot of the art that we see in the Renaissance period. Architecture at this time also shifted back, so we see churches and other buildings begin to incorporate Roman and Greek inspired domes and arches that we talked about in Unit 1. So the Renaissance spread all throughout Europe, from essentially where it started in Italy up to the north, through trade, movement of art and scholars, and the development of the printing press. So this is the printing press here. And so Johannes Gutenberg invented this, where he cast letters of the alphabet. So you put letters here on a metal plate and into a wooden press. So essentially you would pull the lever and press it out. This made printing and selling books easier and cheaper. So essentially it made it easier to make these books, and it cost less, so they're able to sell it for less. So people who didn't have money were able to access it in some way, whereas prior to this they were not. This spread Renaissance ideas quicker, and the first book notably was printed was the Bible. As always, feel free to go back through and fill in any notes missed.